Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on the time zone that you might be tuning in from today. I'm your host, Todd Anderson, Chief Content Officer at Fintech Nexus, formerly Landed Fintech. We're joined here, another session virtually. Manual reviews are killing your competitive edge. Before I turn it over to my guests and our panelists today for some introductions, just a few quick announcements to the audience. And you'll probably hear me say this a few times. We encourage your participation. So if at any point you have a question, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30, 40 minutes in, click Q&A, enter your question, and I'll go ahead and pose those questions to our panel throughout the discussion, towards the end of the discussion, depending on the question and where we are in our flow. Secondly, if you have an issue, you need a phone number, just some general information. Will this be recorded? It is, and it will be sent to you after. But if you have any other general stuff, please use the chat. So we want questions in the Q&A box, and then general information, general questions in the chat box, if you can, please. And I want to also thank the team at Inscribe for their support. Without support from partners like you, we can't do these webinars. We can't do the large-scale in-person events that we have. So thank you for your continued partnership. A few quick things coming up on our schedule. I skipped the first one, August 30th and 31st at the Ritz-Carlton. This is a meetings-only event, so check out fintechnexus.com, as well as our merge event, merging fintech banking and Web3, and then finally our LATAM event. You can get all those details at fintechnexus.com. Now, let me turn it over to our esteemed panel of guests for some introductions and into our discussion. First, I want to go around the room. I'll go to my top left here. Sasha, if you can introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about you and your role.
Yeah, hello everyone. Very glad to be here talking to the people on this call. Very excited. I'm Sasha. I'm a product manager focusing on fintechs in Verif. I've before done some business development, been a solutions engineer, and then that transformed into being a product manager for focusing on fintechs.
Great. Darek.
Thanks, Todd. Hi, everyone. My name is Darren McNeil. I work at Inscribe. So we are a fraud detection and document automation platform. I'm the lead fraud analyst here, and I work closely with our data science and engineering teams to continuously improve our product for our customers. Prior to Inscribe, I've spent my career in various financial institutions dealing with a lot of the exact pain points that we're going to discuss here today.
All right. And Dustin.
Yeah, my name is Dustin Eaton. I work as a senior director in kind of the fraud world, if you will, due diligence. I have worked around 20 years in the financial service industry for a variety of financial service types, from fintechs to big banks, insurance companies, credit unions, et cetera. Focused a lot on funnel efficiencies over the last several years and just creating a better and frictionless experience for consumers, especially in the fraud space or due diligence or document verification space. So happy to be here.
All right. Well, thank you for those intros. And as a reminder to the audience, you'll hear me say this many times, we encourage questions. So please ask them at any point. I want to start, pretty high level. And from there, we'll dig a bit deeper into some of our topics today. But, how have consumer expectations, changed the last few years, and what does that mean for fintechs and financial service providers overall? Maybe Sasha, I'll start with you on this one.
Sure. I think we're all noticed that we do a lot more things online to a point where I think even my grandparents think it's completely ordinary to log into your banking services online, whatnot, right? So it's just a new norm. And I think for fintech specifically, that means that security of the process, of a remote process, is very important. Whereas before you had a person looking in the eyes of the other person, now it's all remote, now it's all online. and that goes both ways, right? It's a whole new remote process for the end user or the consumer and the company, but also within the company, the processes now have to adjust so that they're secure enough that they actually do the due diligence, but at the same time remotely, and their employees might be also remote as well. See that Derek is nodding. I think maybe there's a comment there.
Derek, you want to jump in with your nodding?
Yeah. So from my perspective, what's changed, I guess, is like even before the pandemic, I suppose, a lot of B2B and B2C companies we're definitely seeing buyers who wanted more control over the buying process and to purchase products on their own time at their own speed. So now in the post-pandemic stage, touch wood, but consumers definitely expect a frictionless experience, specifically in online interactions. So from a financial institution and fintech perspective, there's finding the right balance between friction and ease of application is incredibly critical now due to fraud risk. So we saw a huge uptick in fraud during the pandemic, as I'm sure most of us on the call are aware. So yeah, according to a 2021 report by Verity, synthetic ID fraud specifically has increased from 6 billion in 2016 to 20 billion in losses in 2020. So fintechs again saw 70% increase in fraud attacks last year alone. So yeah, internally here at Inscribe, our data definitely supports that too. 5% of financial application documents last year were manipulated in some way, but so far in 2022, that figure is closer to 10%. So it still is on the rise. So from my perspective, it's imperative for risk teams to really build up the defenses at this moment in time. There is currently a huge diversification of anti-fraud vendors that have come to the market in the past 5 to 10 years, some of which I'm sure we'll cover in recommendations later in the session. But it's important to keep in mind that the more friction you add to an application, the more likely a customer may now leave for a competitor. So the last thing any financial institution or fintech want to see now is application abandonment. So we do have to toe a very fine line in terms of supplying a frictionless experience that consumers want, but keeping out bad actors at the same time.
You mentioned the friction balance. Obviously, a lot of people have become, pretty accustomed to, whether it be, Amazon or Netflix, and that is almost zero or very little friction at all. Dustin, I'm curious to get your thoughts. Do customer expectations when it comes to financial services products, do they anticipate it should be as seamless as a Netflix and Amazon type experience, or do they anticipate at least some level of friction due to the fact it's their money, it's their livelihood, and it's a bit different than, just purchasing, something for their home or for their pantry or something like that?
Yeah, I think there's a combination of things. I definitely think that customers are becoming more and more informed as to what they should be expecting. A lot of people may bank at multiple institutions, so they start to compare those two, right? And say, hey, at this place, I can do it all online, or I can get something automated. So they start to compare that. They also will compare it undoubtedly to their other shopping experiences. I think the kind of more educated consumers that maybe have some experience know that there needs to be some type of friction at some level, but there's also a lot of customers that have started to experience very, very close to complete frictionless experiences for the financial institution. So I think it's kind of a combination of both. I do think that there is an absolute need to do more across the financial service industry because there is that expectation from consumers to do more that's frictionless and to be able to provide that higher level of service. And when there is friction, a lot of consumers are getting more accustomed to just this self-healing aspect, right? Where they can fix that friction by doing X, Y, or Z. So if a financial institution isn't providing that ability, then they're going to probably have a higher drop-off or fallout rate for those consumers.
We've started talking, obviously, here about the consumer side of things, but at the same time, through this change of not only the pandemic, but even some of the trends leading into the pandemic that were accelerated by it. Employee expectations and employee processes have changed to meet some of this demand and to deal with some of the increases in not only fraud but other issues that all these new online customers have brought to the fintechs and banks. So what about the employee side of things, and how have some of their expectations changed on how to work in this space and deal with this huge influx of new customers, and maybe customers that did some online banking or online stuff but now do it almost exclusively?
Do you want me to answer that one?
I'll start with you, and then we'll go around
Yeah.
to Sasha and Dara as well.
Yeah, I think employees in a lot of fintech spaces have obviously seen an increase in applications, right? Or consumers who are going through these portals. And what has happened in many experiences that I've seen in talking to colleagues and others in the industry is that the way in which these fintechs have tried to solve the problem is thrown people at the problem. Well, we have more applications, let's just keep adding more people, instead of investing the time and the resources into some product engineering or third-party resourcing, et cetera. And that has created kind of a burden, right, for these employees, and they're kind of getting burnt out. And this is an opportune time, in my opinion, because of the fact that we have this downturn in the economy where the ability to make a dollar is getting squeezed ever so tightly. So there is an absolute need for companies to evolve from an employee satisfaction or engagement standpoint and the ability to make a dollar in an ever-changing world. So I absolutely think it's imperative, and I think it will be the survival paradigm for this post-recession world or wherever we go from here. I think if they don't do that, I'd probably say they have a hard chance of making it or getting the next round of funding, et cetera, for a lot of companies.
Sasha?
Yeah, to add on to what Dustin started talking about is there's definitely a switch to employees expecting to focus on, say, more value-added parts of the process, right? The expectation is that the simpler routine tasks will get automated. I think another interesting aspect here is that employees expect to be able to work remotely, or at least partially work remotely. And that means that for the companies, the whole process also has to be kind of logged and monitored and audited differently, because these people might be working from their bedrooms or whatever locations they might be at, and at the same time the security of the process has to stay the same.
Yeah, from my perspective then, much like Sasha just mentioned, automating tedious tasks seems absolutely critical, in my opinion anyway. So from an employee perspective, especially with the knowledge of like the emerging technologies and available tools on the market currently, no one really wants to work in an environment where they feel constantly backlogged and pressured to get through application queues at an inhuman pace a lot of times. So these teams really deserve to be armed with the best tools and technology, so they can help better perform at the jobs, as well as free up their time to focus on more strategic and important initiatives. The sheer level of sophistication, for example, being used to alter documents by some fraudsters now makes it like finding fraud signals nearly impossible to the human eye. So it can be a real detriment to the morale of the team if documents like this do get through the pipeline. So I don't think it's really fair or reasonable to expect your team to catch all those alterations, and relying on your team to be like experts in every type of document you receive is a bit unreliable and unreasonable, I suppose. So when you do use tools like this, not only do you get the security and reliability of using an automated tool, but it frees up your operations teams, your underwriters, your credit risk analysts to spend time on more strategic tasks.
Picking up, and as a reminder to the audience, if you have questions, please use the Q&A function and ask our group questions at any point. picking up on that last piece, Dara, what are some of the biggest points of friction in the manual review process today, and how is that impacting both fintechs and financial institutions?
Yeah, so good question. So from my perspective, like the time commitment needed to address those edge cases is a big one. So as an individual who's happened to manually review applications, the documents obviously that take the most time are the ones you're unsure of, and you can't give a definitive answer. So having a tool like Inscribe or Vera for another company in the space really helps you give information just by a yes or no, with a lot more confidence. So otherwise, the alternative you could spend 30 minutes or longer to identify a fraudulent document, possibly longer then to add some more time on it to assess their creditworthiness if that customer actually turns out to have legitimate documents. So it's a vicious cycle. Then you get stuck in a backlog, and 10 more applications come through your pipeline. So there are tools on the market that unfortunately take hours rather than seconds to get results, which isn't ideal, obviously, in terms of time management for your team, but that's usually due to those organizations using human in the loop, which basically means the data is being outsourced to humans for verification instead of utilizing AI. So that really doesn't add much to your process. You're still using people who don't work for your organization, and you're exposing a bit of sensitive data to a third party or company. So very briefly then, another pain point would be collecting the correct type of documents. As we all know, every organization has tons of rules around what documents they can and cannot accept, whether that's based internally or based on global regulations or countrywide regulations. So you'd be shocked at the number of different documents you get that aren't the ones you specified for. So that's why here at Inscribe, we have a collect feature. So it's a secure and easy to use portal that recognizes whether or not your customer has submitted the right documents within the right timeframes and prompts them to re-upload them if they're incorrect. So that way, an agent like myself in previous roles, I get the documents I already know they're going to be the bank statement I requested within the last 90 days. Ultimately creates a better experience for the customer because it's a much quicker process and much easier for me as the assessor. So there's no prolonged back and forth anyway.
Dustin, I see you agreeing. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I think overall, the document collection piece has been one of the most challenging solves in the financial service industry, and I think great partners, as was mentioned, are ways to solve for this. There still has to be this kind of education that needs to be provided to consumers, because they'll do things like was mentioned, they'll supply the wrong document, or in other cases, just from a quality standpoint.
Why do they supply the wrong document? Is it just that they don't, is it that they're reading this document, but they think it's close enough? Or is it that the fintech is maybe not describing it as clear as they should?
I think it's a combination of both of those things. A lot of the times the fintech isn't describing what is needed. For instance, it has to be within a certain date range, right? It can't be older than 90 days. Or there might be something where they're saying they need this, this, or this, but this customer has actually something outside of that, but they think it meets that standard. So those are some of the issues. The other thing is just from a quality standpoint, or is going to with this and a output in the sense of its speed. There's still that need for consumers to educate themselves on the best output is really to provide an actual PDF. If you take a picture of it on your phone, or you do other ways or means to upload or supply that document, the AI and the machine learning still has some challenges in getting an output that is quick or that is reliable. So educating the consumers at that forefront, from the right type of documents, expiration date, all those kinds of quality standards that you need, and then the file type, provides a much better customer experience in the end.
Sasa, did you have any additional comments?
I think we here at Verif face fairly similar issues. We've solved them slightly differently. For example, for the documents, we actually have put together our own database of more than 10,000 exemplars, right, all over the world, that actually has all of the rules, the security features, everything. Those that database is actually integrated in our tooling, so we actually feed that information into everything we do. It has taken us years, to be fair, and it's an ongoing process that will continue going on, right? But also, it's very true that the end user has to be educated, and well, for us, what we do it is that we actually have interactive messaging, right, for the user. We actually tell them, hey, you're trying to submit a document. That's not quite right. These are the documents that are actually accepted, and that is configurable. So there are ways around it, but I think there's one more problem that has to be tackled, is that, you know, when you're using human review, humans are inherently biased. And that means that over kind of bigger amounts of data, you're actually going to end up with decisions that are slightly different. Someone was tired, someone was new, someone was, I don't know, unconsciously biased against a certain hair color or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to pile up. So what you also have to do is figure out a way to take away that bias. At the same time, machines only know what you teach them. So machines can do specific things you've trained them for, and then you do need humans for those things that are out of the ordinary. But then at the same time, you still have to make sure that they don't make biased decisions. So it's an interesting world we're in.
I was just going to add something to
Yeah.
that I think is really, really important is that when you have the people doing this job, you need to ensure that they don't have this unconscious bias as it relates to their incentive, right? You're not incentivizing them to get the deal done. You're incentivizing them to do a quality standard that adheres to your underwriting guidelines, et cetera. But if you have a sales related person doing that task, you're going to have more problems at the end of the day. So you need to make sure that there isn't a conflict of interest as it relates to the people who are involved in the manual reviews when they're absolutely necessary. But I agree, when you have a bunch of, we talked about this before, when you have this backlog, you're also going to create just this higher error rate because people are just trying to get through it. It's just, you know, it's checking the box, it's getting it done because they just want to get it through this, you know, this huge list. So it's really, really critical that, again, companies put the time into having the right people do the right job and the right tools to automate where possible so that you're not having this kind of burnout and people just checking the box and your quality standards start to deteriorate and your fraud starts to increase.
Speaking of burnout, we did get a question that came in from one of our audience members, Alicia, who asked, do you have any ideas, and anybody feel free to jump on this, do you have any ideas on how to get higher management to understand the employee pain / burnout and see the need for technology?
Yeah, so I guess I can take that one. I'd probably encourage your management to talk to team members, I suppose, about their experience, point out to any internal data that you may have that shows how long it takes to do these manual tasks that can obviously easily be automated now by numerous different vendors. So you could share case studies that are online, ROI metrics with them, with vendors that you might want to purchase technology from. So if highlighting pain doesn't work, then showing a better potential future probably is more effective.
And just to kind of piggyback off the question, though, is technology always the answer? I mean, technology doesn't always, is not always right and doesn't always solve everything. So it's maybe finding the right balance there.
Yeah, I think technology without the goal or without an idea why you're using technology is not going to do anything good. You actually have to be very aware what you're trying to improve and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be some level of need for a human being, right? But I do think technology provides some great solutions, but there has to be a goal that's envisioned. Otherwise, you know, you can't just say, I'm going to take this vendor and it's going to solve all my problems. You need to really understand it. I've seen that before at fintechs, right? They go to someone like, let's just give the example of Inscribe, and they say, this is going to solve all my problems, but then they don't take the time to work with their engineers, or they don't look at the product suites that might be able to solve for other problems. They just try to plug and play and walk away. But there's so much more that's needed. You need that data, you need that tooling, you need to be able to have conversations with your vendors that you're working with. And if you can't have conversations, then they're probably not the right vendor for you.
Yeah, much like the previous two answers, I think it's a really good question anyway, because it's one that's consistently raised from like management and leaders in the space. So from our perspective anyway at Inscribe, regarding fraud detection and prevention within the application review process, the answer isn't to like automate everything or nothing. That's a bit of like a false dilemma, I suppose. So your team is still the most important asset in fighting fraud. While using technology is obviously good for weeding out potential fraud, it's still important to for professionals and experts in the field to make final judgment calls a lot of the time. So if automated technologies malfunction, which unfortunately they all do, for example, falsely flagging a legitimate customer as fraudulent and preventing them from going forward or whatever, you do end up obviously frustrating applicants and losing good potential customers. So you can't, and in my opinion, you probably shouldn't automate everything. ML models aim to replicate human intuition, but the power there truly lies probably with automating repetitive tasks. So allowing your team members then to free up their time to spend it on more strategic and nuanced activities. Arming your team members with technology that improves their workflows would probably be one of the best ways to empower the team as a whole. So I do definitely think we'll always need the people component of risk management. Only now, hopefully, the work of employees can be more specialized and less focused on tedious activities.
We had another question come in here from another audience member, Shar. For early fintech UI platforms, how do you get them to obtain a model validation when they believe there are no predictive modeling, or are data validations a better solution? It's a bit of a mouthful. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'll give it a crack, I suppose. So yeah, without trying to bore everyone with an answer or revealing too much of our recipe for success, but probably our machine models anyway are built the way most models are built. So you source data for the model, you clean it, you label it, you start training ML models on that data, and continuously test it, provide more data, and so forth. In our sense anyway, we work closely with our customers to understand what they do today. So we're not really trying to rewrite their policies needlessly or processes, just to come up with better ways to make them more efficient. So we have a clear bar for what they're measuring ourselves against when we speak to our customers on a regular cadence like that. So it really helps us improve our models and that kind of thing.
We were talking a little bit about what Alicia brings up in another question before, which is kind of pain points and issues for fintechs and financial institutions. But Alicia asked specifically, what would you say is the greatest pain for fintech lenders? Dustin, Sasha?
I'm going to give it a try. I think the fact that well, knowing your customer is a very broad answer there, right? And for the lending companies, I think it's also first of all ensuring this person can actually pay back the loans, right? And then what we've seen also is that a lot of lenders, especially a lot of lenders that operate in the kind of smaller loan space, they actually get targeted by fully professional fraud rings who actually seem to have office spaces and working hours and whatnot. It's a whole industry, right? And they're constantly, if that is an industry, that means that they are actually constantly trying to reverse engineer the processes. They're constantly trying to find ways in, and keeping up with all of that on your own as a fintech, I think, is quite difficult. I know that we in Veriff have a full department that is actually specifically focused on catching those rings before they can do any damage to our clients. But that's kind of one of our major focuses, right? I think when you're as a company have your business as well, it's spreading yourself a little bit too thin, trying to play catch up there.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback on that, I think overall the biggest pain is just all the aspects associated with fraud, right? It's are they going to make their payment? Or are they going to just disappear, right? Or are they a true, an organized kind of crime unit that has targeted us because we have lax controls, or maybe there's something that they found or exploited that they can take advantage of. I've seen it over and over again. But it all comes down to, for me, why it's even a big pain for these lenders. And this isn't always the case, but a lot of them that I've interacted with in the fintech space, it's because they just didn't build the right controls or put the right people in place. So risk is kind of this afterthought. Oh, we're going to do lending. Let's make the money. And then it's like, wait, I guess we have fraud too that we need to account for. And now we're trying to solve for it. They're already months ahead, the fraudsters, with their insight into the challenges and problems that the company's facing, and they just continue to exploit it. And then when you fill it up, if you don't have those subject matter experts on staff, or you're not constantly investing in that process, like as Sasha said, then you're going to continue to have these exploits. They're going to continue to have these open doors for these fraudsters to keep attacking. So having the right people in place at the day the doors open is really important. But overall, fraud is undoubtedly the biggest challenge, because new products are being offered by these fintechs or services. And as those new products and services come to the market, the fraudsters are ripe for saying, look, this is easier, or this is quicker, or whatever it might be. So it's critical to have the right people in place, to invest in the tooling and the people and the resourcing to make sure that you're constantly addressing those challenges.
I wanted to shift a little bit of our conversation to, where should people look if they want to start automating, and what should they look for in a vendor when they're considering moving in this direction? Maybe Dustin, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think that we kind of hinted to this with one of the individuals' questions earlier, is that you got to go to your frontline staff. You got to go to the people who are impacted every single day to see what the challenges are and what you need to bring to the table to find solutions for, or to be able to fix a dilemma. And then when you get that opportunity to meet with them and you intake all that information, then you can find the right solution, right? You can start looking out there on the web, or going to webinars and other places to kind of start gathering your information that tells you whether this solution will solve for those problems. And then, of course, making sure that your stakeholders and other individuals within the organization are well aware of what you're trying to solve for, that you believe that this solution can help. And then those discussions with the vendor, for me, that's really, really critical, is to be able to see that this is an organization or a company that's going to be responsive, right? As challenges come up, or if there's an issue, that they quickly solve that problem. I've seen many examples where I send an email out to a vendor and they pass it on to someone else, and they pass it on to someone else. And it's like weeks later that I might get a response back, or I might have a technical problem and I bring in their technical leads, and then again continues to be a problem longer than it needs to be. I like to see great data and great response from a vendor. If I don't have that, there's probably someone else that can fill those shoes.
Sasha, any comments to add there?
Well, I think we're mostly on the vendor side here and there. So, but I think what I see quite a bit is that, to what Dustin said, the vendor that is actually easy to integrate into your systems. Because if your engineers are going to get lost somewhere there in the developer documentation, they're going to set up something that's not fully functioning, that's not using all of the features, and then you'll end up not actually getting the full benefits of what that vendor offers.
Yeah, again, coming from a vendor side of things, but as I mentioned in a previous question, I would definitely recommend probably starting automation with probably the most tedious tasks your team members are working on. So again, that way they can free up their time to review edge cases and all those applications that need a closer look. I would also say a good starting point is probably where machines can just simply outperform humans. So again, detecting fraud in documents would probably be a good example here. And then in terms of like specific tools, I've used personally in previous roles, I've used identity verification tools like Jumio and MyTech, but then of course there's Verif, who seem to have a very tech-forward approach like we do here at Inscribe. Another trend I've seen recently emerging is behavioral biometrics. So in that space, BioCatch would be a really interesting tool to check out if that's something you were looking into. And then for a plug here, then there's, of course, you need document fraud detection and automation. So a tool like Inscribe. So documents are still key to almost all financial crimes, even in the highly digital world we're living in now.
Is there a the last point you made there, is there sometimes a misnomer about fraud, maybe from fintechs, especially like early stage fintechs, that some of the fraud they deal with wouldn't necessarily involve that many documents because it causes them to create all these documents, and that maybe the fraudsters are looking for something simpler, easier way to get in, and they try to stop them at the front door, but in reality fraud is an ongoing problem, and fintechs kind of maybe get caught in just the onboarding part of it?
I think Dustin touched on it earlier in terms of a lot of early stage fintechs anyway definitely forget about the potential and the possibility of fraud and how advanced a lot of these fraudsters can actually be. The sophistication levels out there now currently are kind of overwhelming a lot of times. So again, to the human eye, it's almost impossible to tell sometimes. So I think for especially early stage startups in the fintech space and lending space, it is definitely something that gets overlooked quite regularly, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say that, one of the exercises that I went through in the past with a fintech is I literally went through every aspect of fraud I could envision a fraudster taking advantage of the kind of customer journey, right? From the onboarding to the document collection to all the other stages, so that I could try to do the best to find opportunities, to find solutions or tools to provide a way to catch those individuals. So, we talked a little bit about behavioral, right? The velocity to which the person's trying to get into the account, the quick, what is it, 1 a.m. when they're searching for a particular product or service? There's all those types of things. If you're not ingesting that data and looking at things, fraud at a holistic level, then you're probably going to miss it. If you're looking just at Inscribe saying this is a fraudulent document, but not looking at anything else, then you really need to take a step back and look at it holistically. And I think that doesn't happen a lot at fintechs. They think, well, we're offering loans, so we're just going to have this particular type of fraud. Well, actually, you could have this type and this type as well, or you could have a more sophisticated approach where they're using bots or other things. So it's really critical that you take that step back, that 360-degree view, and look at things holistically from a fraud perspective, in my opinion.
Is there also a in part the the bet that they make is growth versus some of these things? Do they think it stamps out growth if we put our risk level like super high? Our investors are asking for growth over here, but it's kind of that balance of where do we fit some of these things? Because we obviously don't want to put so much controls in place that, for every 10 people that come, one gets a loan. They want to approve a lot, but they also, need to try to do it in a safe way, but they need to grow.
Yeah, I think that's the $1 million question, right? The right level of friction, the right level of balance for the consumer. It is undoubtedly a challenge. And that's why I think data is so critical. So you can show, what's your average loss? How long does it take to investigate a case? Where are those entry points? You've got to be able to have that data to surface so that they can see that, yeah, we've grown, but we've also grown in fraud too, right? So you can account for those. And this is where we've grown in fraud, or this is where we're having these challenges. If you're not bringing that to the table to executives, or if they're not listening, then it's going to be a challenge for sure. And I've definitely seen the not listening part too, right? It's just that growth mentality. But you've got to get them to see it. And I usually find the best success with good data.
Yeah, to add to what Dustin said there, I think the ultimate goal of risk management strategy in any organization is to, or in fintech specifically, is to approve more customers. So through improved fraud detection, reduce losses, better, faster decision making, streamlined onboarding, that kind of stuff. So the one and only role for us is to support business growth in a responsible manner. So it is something that's critically essential, I suppose, in these ongoing things.
We had a question come in here from Michael asking, can we talk about the manual review pain level? Where do they happen? It's not just for all applications. Talking about credit bureau products, multi-channel verification. Where is the manual review pain level?
I've actually noticed that aside from the very obvious onboarding, because I think that's something that's mentioned a lot, what I've noticed with a lot of fintechs is that the so-called account recovery is a really painful process. I've heard things from literally sending emails of you standing next to your computer, all kinds of really crazy hoops that the users have to jump through to be able to re-access their accounts. And that is also where machines can help, or vendors like Verif, who are doing identity verification, where they can actually re-verify that it's the same person. That is, I think, something that's surprisingly painful at the moment.
Another question came in from, I think I'm pronouncing their name correctly here, Bhaskara. Is passive authentication / verification the answer to having better control without introducing a whole lot of friction? Dustin or Dara?
Yeah, I suppose I would often side for step-up verification, I suppose. So asking for more data when people don't pass the initial IDV or document checks. Similar, I suppose, in a two-factor authentication kind of method that we're probably familiar with now, but that could be a solution, so it doesn't cause friction for everyone when they have kind of all their ducks in order at some stage.
Yeah, I was going to say, I tend to agree with that. Like some type of, add the friction where necessary, but only when necessary. A waterfall effect of some sort in the flows are, for me, the easier way. So if someone can, they pass these different checks to credit bureau, they pass the documentation, they pass identity verification, the ID collection, whatever, then let them go as far as you can, in my opinion. But when you start to see those markers where things just don't seem to add up, then you start creating that level of friction. Maybe you grab just a driver's license, but something comes up and you want to grab a selfie as well, or whatever it might be in your onboarding process, or your authentication process. So I tend to go with more of that approach for sure.
Yeah, I think there is some friction that makes sense, because yeah, we want as little friction as possible, but at the same time, sometimes security is more important. I think, to echo what was said here, I also like to think of the onboarding process as a sort of series of steps that either bring happiness or retract happiness, and then you kind of have this like happiness score of your user, right? That, you know, the more friction you introduce, the more in depth you go, but then, you know, the closer they get to their goal, then the happier they get, and so on. So it's, I think, frictionless, or let's say passive authentication is good as first steps, but as soon as something's not checking out, you have to start introducing friction there.
Looks like we got another one from Michael about, ask for your opinions on phone device text back as a second layer of authentication.
Yeah, from my perspective, I suppose it's not a bad way to add another layer of verification and risk management, but like most things, there are unfortunately lots of tools on the market where people can fake phone numbers and that kind of thing. So I wouldn't rely on that as your only additional layer of authentication, but it is, as part of the stepping stone process, I suppose it is a good thing to include sometimes.
I think the good thing about also using maybe not a text back, but a mobile fallback is that you actually get a lot of device data from the mobile phone, and then you can check if, let's say, the IP address is actually close to where the initial session was started, if the settings are checking out, or does it look like it's actually this faked phone. So in many ways, if you can trigger something on the user's phone, you can get a lot of data from that without introducing extra friction. And on top of that, everyone prefers taking images with their phone and doing things on their phone rather than on laptop. So users happy, you know, fraud team on that, or fraud prevention team on the other side is also very happy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I tend to agree. If you can get the data from the phone, I think it's just as valuable. It becomes that much more valuable, right? There's a treasure trove of information, you know, making sure the device pans out, making sure it's not a VoIP or other type of, you know, service that may be more inclined to be indicative of fraud. So those are important things. So if you're going to use some type of option like this, make sure you're getting some data to utilize and leverage.
One thing I've been curious about lately, and I think Sasha, you brought it up a bit earlier about fraud rings. You know, clearly the fraudsters are coordinating, and they're coordinating in many ways very openly on the internet, whether it be, you know, through chat rooms, Twitter, whatever. Should fintechs and financial services companies be better at coordinating and helping one another? Because ultimately, if Capital One is breached, it doesn't help JP Morgan, because chances are JP Morgan could come under attack tomorrow. So should there be, I know that there is probably some cooperation, more than maybe, you know, we might know on the outside looking in, but should there be more cooperation to catch some of these rings and patterns that might help the companies so they don't get hacked?
I would definitely say yes. We actually, well, as a vendor of a lot of fintechs, right? We're in a bit of it's a bit easier for us perhaps, but what we do at Verif is that we actually offer our clients to opt in into kind of like cross-linking that we have, where if we detect fraud on for one of our clients who is in the same sector or industry as some other client, then we'll actually flag that user for the other companies as well. So because there's definitely a lot of cross vendor or cross fintech fraud happening, and they also migrate. They will try with one, those will increase their security levels. You will see the same fraud ring go migrate to some other, start the same thing there.
Yeah, I was just going to add that if you're not using a fraud vendor today that has that type of option, right, an opt-in or consortium aspect to it where you can share it, you're probably missing out on a tremendous amount of value, right? You've got to be able to do that. Banks and federal government has utilized things like 314A and other types of sharing or information sharing for years. Fintechs are just, I think, a little bit behind the curve a little bit on this, but there is tools that are helping bridge that gap. But they're absolutely, if we're going to successfully tackle fraud across the globe, there has got to be some information sharing at some level or tools that allow for that type of sharing. It's a critical part, but we often see it. Fraudsters will go after multiple institutions till they find the weakest one. And if you have that ability to share, you can say, well, look at this velocity. They applied, they've seen the social security number 6 times in the last day, or, this person has been flagged as fraud at this other institution. Maybe we need to put another pair of eyes on it because there's something that they saw that maybe we're missing. So there's absolutely a need for that sharing of data to be successful, in my opinion.
Another question here from Shar, and Dara, I'll point this one to you. For vendors that have rules with a score with a significant range available to assign, what is the best practice for assigning those scores?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So at Inscribe, we obviously have a feature similar to this called Trust Score. So it allows the user to set thresholds for like auto accept and auto reject rules on documents based on your own risk appetite. So it is configurable. Many of our customers today use Inscribe's automation to set rules. Auto accept applications with a trust score above 75 or anything below 25 is auto rejected, for example. So using Inscribe's trust score in that way kind of reduces the number of documents that need to be manually reviewed by around 55%, I think, so give or take. So you can also set criteria when you want documents flagged for further reviews, such as like trust score range, document date, other criteria that would normally prompt kind of a second look as well. So there is some severe benefits to using kind of trust scores in order to reduce like workload for your team and help with time management as well.
I was just going to say, I think that most good vendors will typically say to you, this is what we think, right? Our data shows that you should kind of have this threshold when it comes to your score. And then from there, the critical part, we've talked about this already in this webinar, is about the investment, right? So you set the trust score or the score itself at a certain level. If you tend to see more friction or create too many manual reviews, then that's when you start making those adjustments, those incremental adjustments. Look and see what the data shows and then kind of go from there. So I think you set the standard as recommended by the vendor of choice, and then from there, make the modifications as needed. And maybe in some cases, they're saying that should be an automatic decline, but you want to give it a manual review, and then you can learn from those manual reviews. Well, we learned that maybe we could have a little bit more lenient threshold, or maybe we just want to, maybe we learned that, yes, they're absolutely right. There were always fraudsters when they met this particular threshold. So it's important to kind of just work well with your vendor and ensure that you kind of learn from those experiences. I think you're talking, Todd, but I can't hear you.
All right, there we go. I don't know how that happened, but sorry about that. Any final comments as we go around the room in terms of kind of where the space is headed, and kind of just final thoughts on kind of where fraud is today and what the future might look like. I'll go Sasha, Dustin, and then Dara. We'll wrap with you.
Well, I think there's fraud is definitely getting more sophisticated, but at the same time, so do our fraud prevention systems, right? So I think in some ways it will continue the same way. What I think is changing is that the fintechs are getting smarter, and they are getting more aware of what's out there, and that means that there will be a lot more flexibility expected out of the out of the vendors instead of one fits all solutions. Fintechs will start actually being able to tailor the experiences to their needs.
Yeah, I would say that I personally think that things will just start to get really cool and really neat over the next several years. I think the behavioral aspects are huge and there's tremendous value there if done right. So, I think we've dropped some names for a couple of vendors that are out there that are really pioneering in many ways this part of the technology. But behavioral aspect of being able to link the bad actors, better predict the bad actors, or various data points that are collected like velocity, PII linkage, or device characteristics and more. I think those are going to be, where we start to see this industry get smarter and quicker. So incorporating more of what I mentioned earlier, like a more holistic picture of the consumer or the bad actors to identify who's bad and who's not.
Yeah, like Dustin and Sasha just mentioned, but I think obviously fraud is going to get a lot more sophisticated over the coming years. I think we'll definitely, the emergence of more first-person fraud is definitely going to be more prevalent too. We're seeing a lot more sharing of fraudulent documents across numerous platforms online, Telegram, Reddit, legitimate web or illegitimate websites that are selling documents, that kind of thing. So I think we'll see the emergence of that a bit further. We touched on it before, but I think we're definitely going to see a lot more data sharing across fintechs and companies in this space to prevent those bad actors. So it can definitely kind of fraud consortiums more commonly coming together. We'll probably community of anti-fraud professionals come together to share data, experiences, and strategies for battling against these fraudsters. I think that's probably going to be another kind of expansion in the near future, the next few years. But yeah, to throw in a very small plug at the end, but from Inscribe's perspective, we do have really exciting announcements in the coming month or so. So mid-September, hopefully you'll be hearing a lot more from us in regards to kind of new features. So just ask everyone to kind of keep an eye on social media platforms or our website where you'll be able to see updates for that.
All right. I think that's a good place to end. All right. So Dara, Sasha, and Dustin, thank you very much. Special thanks to Inscribe for your continued support and partnership. Thank you to our audience. I think you asked about a total of 15 questions. So thank you for your participation. And as always, check out fintechnexus.com for all upcoming virtual and in-person events. Thanks so much. Enjoy your weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.